Calling this meeting of the Public Services Committee to order at 5:07. All right. First, we'll have a review and approval of minutes dated Tuesday, March 11th, 2014.
Reviewed and moved to approve.
Second, Erpenbach.
All right, we have, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right, that passes. Okay, the first item on the agenda today will be fee increases for fire prevention permits and licenses. We will have Fire Marshal Dean Lanier giving a presentation.
Good afternoon, Dean Lanier, Fire Marshal at Sioux Falls Fire Rescue. We're coming today with a proposal for fee and permit changes that are outlined in Ordinance. Fire Department provides fees for licenses that are required under the International Fire Code, and we also issue permits that are required by the International Fire Code as well. We've done some analysis of other cities and fee schedules. I tried to take just the highlights of what fees are being charged in other similarly sized cities, as well as cities that have comparable fire departments. So within the scope of the sample cities that you see provided for you are their fee structures. Our goal in Sioux Falls Fire Rescue is to be on the average with our cost figures in comparison to those other cities, and you can see as our averages played out, some of our fees have fallen behind. To the bottom of the page, you'll see our license permit increases and averages. From 1996, when our fee structure first started to take form, they were changed again in 2002, provided on average about a 20% increase at that point. In 2007, they were modified again through city ordinance, about a 50% increase in the average cost of all license and fees were undertaken then. In 2014, we are proposing a 15% increase in those license and permit fees. That will be a flat baseline increase to all of the fees. Over time, we're looking at making small incremental changes to some of our licenses that are quite a bit below the average. But at this point, all that we're proposing is a 15% baseline, and then we'll make small incremental changes as we see those numbers change over the years. Available for you if you have any questions at all.
Any questions from the committee? Give us just a second here. Councilman Karski.
Was there some sort of methodology we used to come up with this?
We started off with just a baseline fees. There wasn't a specific methodology. If you go from city to city, jurisdiction to jurisdiction, you may see some jurisdictions that try to run this almost like an enterprise. Those cities would be descriptive of ones that are way on the higher end. We're talking about the highest end of licenses and permits. So that would be descriptive of some of those cities that you see in there with extremely high numbers. We don't necessarily take that same approach. We try to be on the average of the regional cities as well as the like-sized fire departments in this area.
Go ahead.
Councilman Karski,
To follow up to that, so you're saying that these fees by no means even come close to covering the cost of administering these licensing programs and that type of thing?
No, it's not a cost recovery format.
Okay, thank you.
We don't have it configured so that it would recoup funds based on the types of inspections and permits that are provided.
Okay.
Councilor Erpenbach.
Thank you. Thanks, Dean. And you told me earlier, and I think you said it in your remarks, that there's whole number of fees and licenses and things that we do. For instance, on the examples you've given us, like a repair garage or for hazardous materials, how often might I, if I were involved with this, how often might I have to pay that fee? Is that an annual thing, or?
That's correct. It's a one-time annual license issuance. It goes along with an annual inspection. So we're out to that business once per year to provide a prevention inspection. I can tell you some of the things that we've changed that have been well received within our business community. We are pushing more information out to our business owners. Our goal is first-time compliance. So in many businesses, they already have a checklist of inspection items that they know we're going to be looking for prior to our arrival. We get there on scene, we walk through the business with them with that checklist, and then outline for them if there are any code violations that need to be addressed. We're having much better outcomes with that. I think in the long term, that's going to pay us huge dividends and be able to actually accomplish more with a decreased amount of resources.
If I might, just one more, Mr.
Please
Chair.
continue.
And I think you've answered the question, but I want it to be really clear that if I have one of these businesses that is required to have this inspection, you're not going to randomly show up on my front doorstep one day. I'm going to know ahead of time.
Absolutely.
And I'm going to know what you expect of me. Is that right?
Absolutely. That's absolutely correct. Not only are you getting contact from us at the beginning of the year with the issuance of the license, you're also getting pre-notification of the inspection coming, as well as the items that are used for the inspection itself. So we don't have a hidden agenda. I don't think safety is really a hidden agenda item. So in addition to doing the inspection, I think it's also incumbent on us to educate business owners onto how they keep their own businesses safe.
And if I could just one more, I just, whenever I see you, I hearken back to a time when we were dealing with someone that didn't seem to understand that. And I don't want to bring that up again, but I want us to understand, and I want the public to understand that we're, number one, as you said, this is not an enterprise. We're not making money on this. Correct. That our number one goal is to keep our citizens safe, including those people that own these businesses that are, you know, in some interesting places. So I'm pleased to see that the numbers are kind of creeping up. They need to, but they're not in that outrageous range, and I'm really kind of glad you didn't tell us what towns these are, because then we tend to kind of trash those.
They are towns that would be very familiar to us.
Right, exactly.
So
and so
I was a little bit surprised myself as I started gathering some of the information. It was a bit eye-raising to see some of the fees and charges. But I think overall our perspective is still to provide a valued service to the business community so that we keep safety in the forefront.
I guess I'm not sure what our goal is here, but I would hope that my colleagues would approve this to go to full council. If it's appropriate, I would make that motion.
Any other?
Second, Aguilar.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Do we have any other questions from the committee? I have just one, Dean. Have we had any comments back from these business owners on the rate increases?
I haven't had the opportunity to talk with business owners themselves. I did have an opportunity to meet this morning with all the safety contractors that are in Sioux Falls in the general area. We have a get-together at least once a year. We talked about these fee increases. I think you would find as a general comment back from them that Sioux Falls is very reasonable in comparison to some of the other cities that they do business in. We do provide a good service to the public, and we think we're providing it at a reasonable value as well.
Thank you very much. I also wanted to open this up for any public input. Do we have anyone who would like to comment on this issue? Okay, thank you. With that being said, then we will move to a vote on this. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
That passes 4-0. All right, next item on the agenda will be the pawn shop ordinance review. We'll have Assistant City Attorney Keith Allenstein and Lieutenant Terry Mixel giving the presentation.
Good afternoon. My name is Terry Mixel. I'm a lieutenant with the Sioux Falls Police Department. I was here on April 22nd to give you a brief overview of Leads Online, but there was many specific questions that were asked of me. I did a response in reference to that to the city councilors. During that time frame, I also received a phone call from one of the pawn shops in town indicating that they had received a letter stating that the police department was trying to change the ordinance. With that, the response I sent to you, I sent to all 50 of the people that are on Leads Online so that they knew exactly the conversation or the document that I sent to you. With that, I'm just going to briefly go over the document, give you some of the highlights of it. There were some other questions that were asked of us, and I'm going to address them here, and then if there's anything else, we'll address that. Part of when I was here the first time, I reported there were 400 hits. There were several questions specifically to where the property went, how it was getting back to the victims, to the pawn shops, or to the owners, them processes. To go through that and do all 400 hits would be very time consuming. It did take two of us 2 days just to do 2013. And there were 59 hits that I looked at. And with that, the value of property that was reported stolen, and as their estimate of the property that they reported to the police, was $98,000. The property that was recovered, based on the reports, and the property recovered was approximately $71,000. The amount paid by the pawn shop for the property that was recovered in reference to these 59 hits was roughly $13,000. Persons charged out of them was 53 people were charged. Cases where the items returned to the owner were 19. Cases that were returned to the pawn shop were 3. And items still in evidence are 37. Number of hearings to dispute ownership was 3 that we had, and it appears that they were, when I say 1, that is either the property was given back to the victim, either by someone didn't show or they actually won in the court case. I was asked about the number of items reported. As you can see, in 2013, there was 8,893 items reported. Part of a response that was generated by Sergeant Burns back in 2011 gave a snapshot of how many items actually had serial numbers. And in reality, to recover more property, the owners have to really record their serial numbers. Obviously, you can't do that with jewelry and other items, but we get roughly before, and it still is about 78% of the items reported to the Sioux Falls Police Department that actually have a serial number. So it is very low. So when you look at the 400 hits, it doesn't seem like much, but compared to the number of serial numbers that are reported, it seems right on line with that. But I think the most important thing is the number of searches that were conducted by the officers or the detectives, and there were 12,000 some in them 4 years. You can see that they're utilizing it daily in our investigations. Part of one of the questions was, is it effective? Do we feel it's effective? If you look at them 12,000 searches in 4 years, it's very effective, because not only do we find stuff with it, but we also can eliminate people. If they say, I believe so-and-so took it, we can look and see that they're not in that pawn system. It doesn't eliminate it, but it doesn't necessarily confirm that they actually did it. Is it effective to the citizens? I think if you look at the numbers of the property that was returned to them, and I should note that the property that was recovered is not all recovered from just a pawn shop or secondhand store. It may only been one piece, but that one piece may lead to search warrant or other property recovered. And I just added that whole total in there when I added that in. I didn't separate them out to see what the total value was recovered just from the pawn shops. But if you look at the value to the citizen and to the people and to the amount that was recovered, I think that's a great value to the citizen. I feel it's very effective for the police department. If you've noticed, if you read the Argus Leader article on it, I thought it was a compliment that one of the pawn shops indicated they like the fact that that they can say all of our merchandise has been reported to the police. It has been checked by the police. I realize I wasn't here during the 2011, but I realized that buyback fund created it creates a lot of issues, and I understand that. I understand that when the police come and take their merchandise, and that is what they're basing their income on, that does hurt. That affects their bottom line, and I understand that. I also don't know how we can go around that, how we can get around the fact that we're still going to take that property. There is a procedure to get that property back through the court systems that they can initiate at any time. I know that you had sent 6 examples for us to look at. All 6 are still in the process. Most people know court is not a get arrested today and you're done tomorrow. It could take years, in fact, by the time we go through all of that. But as Keith Allenstein had written in that response, there is no time frame that the owner or a business owner can apply to try to have a court hearing to get that property back. They can do that the next day if they want. I mean, it's not dependent on the court or the process. They can start that at any point. So, in summary, from what you read, we feel is a good program. I've talked to the chief. He feels based on just the time saving for the detectives. The old way was to go out, collect the pawn tickets. We started to move towards a computerized system based on the county system. Some of the larger pawn shops were reporting computerized at that time. However, that system was removed from us. We were forced to move into another system. I was part of that when we started looking. When I look now to see if there's something better, one of the biggest points, and I've never pointed out before in reference to leads online, is at that time when I looked at that program and when I look now to see if there's something else, they're the only one that has NCIC access. And what that means is if I put a piece of property, we report it to the National Crime Information Computer. We put that serial number in there. If a pawn program doesn't have, or like Leads Online, doesn't have the ability to check that computer, it'll never give us them hits. All the hits will be from the detective manually searching through that. So that was another huge selling point at that time, because they were the only one that offered that. And today, I can't find any others that offer that. So again, we feel that it's a bargain for the citizens and for the police department to utilize this service.
Okay. Do we have any further part of presentation?
Assistant City Attorney Keith Allenstein. I just want to add on to the process that happens once the police seize the property, so that everybody understands that process and some of the outcomes of this. We've been recently informed, and we had already started this process in place with anytime there's multiple claimants to property, which when we have a person who is alleged to have taken something without permission and that property ends up in the pawn shop, we always have potential multiple claimants. We've been informed that the courts, our Second Circuit, agrees that a court order is necessary in virtually all property releases, and so that's what we have already been doing, and they have approved that process. The way it works when a pawn shop or a secondhand goods store is involved is once we get information from the state's attorney's office that property is no longer needed as evidence, or once the police department determines that property is not needed as evidence because the case cannot be prosecuted, those types of things where it's never even sent over because it cannot be prosecuted. State statute requires that all property that's seized by the police department be released pursuant to court order. So we send out, I shouldn't say we, I send out letters to all the people that I look through the reports. I figure out as best as I can who all the possible claimants are to that property. I send a letter to them. I send, along with that letter, a copy of the letter to all the other potential claimants so that everybody knows who's involved in this process. I also send a copy of the state statutes explaining how the process works so that they can file an application. I created an application form that the clerk of courts uses. I created the form order that the judges use. When a person gets this letter, if they choose to make a claim on that property, they simply go to the clerk's office, fill out an application form. There is no application fee for that, no filing fee, and they are given a court date. The amount of time varies with relation to which judge it goes before and when they're available. That hearing is held. I typically do not attend those hearings because our only part of this is as the property holder. At some point in time, either the court will send us an order or the person who prevailed in the hearing will come over with an order, and that property is released pursuant to the issue of that order. As I indicated in the letter that was sent to you at the end of that, since we began this process, and again, we began this process of sending out these letters, and that prior to this ordinance change here, I've sent out approximately 78 letters that deal with secondhand goods stores or pawn shops. It's the same process if we have a non-pawn shop involved, but we got two people that are claiming ownership rights to this property. In those 78 times, there's been roughly 52 hearings that have been scheduled or hearings that have been requested. In all but 7 of those, either the hearing was not held, or I should say in 42 of those, the property was returned back to the alleged victim. There were 5 times where the property was returned back to the pawn shop, and twice where part of the property was returned to the pawn shop and part was returned to the owner. There are, I think, about 3 situations where the property is still in our evidence. 2 of those is because even though a hearing was requested and even scheduled, no one showed up. And the last one, as I think I indicated, is scheduled for May 19th. So I think those numbers, the fact that at least 42 out of the 52 times, the courts have decided that the property goes back to the person who was alleged as being the victim, just further demonstrates that the police department is not in there just seizing property willy-nilly. They're seizing property based upon probable cause. We understand the concerns about the buyback fund that went away. But the problem is that when we get information that the property is stolen, we have probable cause to do that. We seize that property, and there's a mechanism that if we seized it wrongfully, that the pawn shops or secondhand goods stores can get that back. I think it's important on this revisit of the pawn ordinance to remember when we were doing this wasn't a wholesale change to the pawn shop ordinance. Basically what this was, the main purpose of the change was to bring in the secondhand goods stores. For years, the pawn shops had argued for a level playing field because an individual could take the same piece of property, go into a pawn shop, they had to report, had to take ID and all those kind of things. They could take that same piece of property and go to a secondhand goods store and didn't have to report anything, and the pawn shops felt that was hurting their business. That was the main purpose of this, was to bring in those secondhand goods stores. There was some other cleanup language that was done as well, but that was the main function of this ordinance change. Leads Online was actually in place before this ordinance change happened, and is not even specifically addressed in this ordinance. That's an administrative tool that we use. The ordinance has required since 1957 some record keeping by the pawn shops, since at least 1994, that those pawn shops report that to the police department in some way, shape, or form. And as Lieutenant Mixel explained, the present method that we have is much more efficient for the police department, for the citizens. It allows that property to be discovered in much more real time so that we can make sure that it gets into police custody and we know where it's at. Because once the property is transacted, the police department doesn't typically go down and try to track that down 2 or 3 times down the road after it's been transacted numerous times. Some additional questions. Again, that were forwarded to me. I did respond to these, but just to point those out, one of the concerns was in the audit report that there was a suggestion that we create some sort of a spreadsheet that the pawn shops could access for information, because there was a criticism about the lack of communication as far as the status of property goes. This was discussed back then. Our understanding was that we were providing a better service than that. I guess the gold standard of service, and that's personal communication with the police department. Rather than having a spreadsheet that would be difficult to maintain, difficult to update, and would give you a limited amount of information as to what was going on with that property, either that it's still being held because it's under investigation, it's been submitted, or the case is ongoing. It would give you very, very basic information that the answers to the questions that would naturally come with just that basic information would require a phone call to the police department to say, well, what's this mean? Where is the case at in the system? We have offered, we did back when this pawn ordinance passed, and that offer stands, that the property crimes sergeant is available for any questions that come of the pawn shops. You can get much more information in a quicker time. If the sergeant cannot tell from simply accessing the New World system exactly what's going on with the property, he can contact me. I can see where the case is at in the court system. Either one of us can contact the state's attorney's office to get a better feel for what's going on with the case, as far as whether it's being prosecuted, whether it's where it's at in the system, and those kind of things. The last thing that I think has not been potentially addressed were the 6 cases that we were given examples of, and as Lieutenant Mixel indicated, and as I sent out, all those pieces of property are still in police custody. We understand that this is a slow process. We get complaints about that from anytime we seize property from anybody. There is a method. I mean, I send out the letters once the state's attorney's office lets us know, or once we know that the case is done and it's not going any further. But there is a process, so the person doesn't have to wait for me to do that. The statutes allow that any person who wishes to make application for return to seized property can do so. Statutes do require that the evidence no longer, or that the property no longer be needed as evidence. But we have had situations where we've been contacted by people while the case is still pending, saying, hey, I need this property back, and I tell them the procedure, they file their application, and it's up to the court then as to whether that property can be released or not. State statute mandates that the police department, once they seize evidence, hold on to that until it's no longer needed as evidence, and that's either decided by the state's attorney when they're done with the case, or if the case isn't done yet, whether it has evidentiary value that where a photograph can't be taken of it or something else, that's ultimately up to the court. So with that, we would certainly be happy to answer any other questions that you may have. Thank you.
Questions? Councilor Offenbach.
Thank you, both. I appreciate it. I did have 2 questions. One is, are we making any changes to the pawn shop ordinance at this time?
We have, this was brought to us as a concern, as a revisit of just how things are going. We're happy with the way things are working at this point in time. We have no intentions or any plans to be making any changes. So, no, that is, we're here because we got asked to be here and to review this.
Right, exactly. And then, as you noted, Leads Online is just a record-keeping system. It's the one that we've chosen to use as a city. The administration of the police department has chosen that, and it seems to be working really well for you. How much do we spend on that each year?
As I understand, it's about right around $8,000 a year. It was originally paid for by a grant. It is no longer paid for by that grant. It is a budgeted item, as I understand it. And compared to the savings that going back to the old system, there are roughly 50 stores now that, because we brought in secondhand goods and all that, 50 stores that are regulated by this ordinance. We have 7 property crimes detectives. You can do the math. So that would, if they work 7 days a week, and they wanted to even get just a weekly update, they would have to go to at least one of those shops every day. They don't work 7 days a week, so that means they'd have to go out and physically go to each one of those, at least one, if not two, every day of their working day. And I should point out, I don't know if those numbers, if you remember those numbers, I don't have the numbers right in front of me, but we're not the only agency out there using Leads Online. There are thousands of agencies out there using it. Their system, I know some of the concerns were about access to this information being hacked into. Obviously, as the Target example gives us, no system is perfect. We're happy to report that there have been none of those concerns. Various different federal and state government agencies use Leads Online. It's a very secure system. It's probably a better system than if we had our own system that they were reporting to. I shouldn't even say probably, it is.
If I might just make one comment and just
continue.
kind of tie it back to the report that we had in our earlier meeting about the vote centers, and there was one comment, we all snickered. What was the negative comment? Get rid of the computers. And we all went, "Pff, that's not going to happen." I think the point is the same with Leads Online. We're not going back to a written little tag system where our detectives go out and waste that kind of time when we have way bigger fish to fry. And so I want the folks to understand that this really is working for us. This is a really great system. I appreciate you coming and reporting back to us. I like what you're doing. I appreciate how it's working out. You know, it's a great thing. So thank you.
And just to complete that answer to one of your questions, Counselor, basically we had made an agreement after the audit in 2010 that we would ask for the police department to come back in a year and tell us it's been 3.
Right, and I understand that, Mr. Chair, I absolutely do, but that was the question that I got, and Keith said the same thing, that people were asking, well, so what changes are you making to the law? And I'm like, we're not, we're just taking a report. And so I wanted that to be very clear, that we're
Correct.
just really hearing an update, and I
you.
appreciate the update.
Counselor Karski?
Just curious about processes and how we do things. In the past, obviously, the presence of a detective or officer in a pawn shop was a routine or regular occurrence. How often are you going, or do we have that presence in a pawn shop these days? And you know, we say everything's supposed to be logged in on Leads Online. How do we know we're receiving full compliance with that?
I guess at this point, we don't. I mean, we're not doing any stings, or we're getting the information. When it's not uploaded in a timely manner, we get notification that somebody's fallen behind. Sergeant Hoekstra would contact them and say, hey, you're behind. Other than that, the detectives, when they have to go look at a piece of property to identify it or to seize it, that would be the times that they're going in to the pawn shops themselves.
And that would be if something was maybe came up as a hot lead on Leads Online. Is that why they would go down
Certainly
there?
could. They could, or they could generate their own lead. Like, for instance, you get your car stereo stolen, and you think it's Billy Jones, but you don't have your serial number, but you know that it's got a cigarette burn on the face of it. And this is one of my cases. So I actually went and looked, and here is that stereo with that cigarette burn in there. That we're probably going to seize that based on probable cause, because that's a very unique identifier when they can tell me exactly. I had another one. I don't recall if it was in, but he said it has Hootie and the Blowfish in it. And when I recovered it, it had Hootie and the Blowfish inside of it when I fired it up on a battery, kicked it out. How often do we go there? We allocate our time the best we can. The detectives do. They get there when they have to go look at there, but are we stopping in regularly to look at the stuff? No. No, we don't do that. As the cases continue to increase, part of the system is, what makes it efficient is they don't have to go to the pawn shops. They can sit and do their leads right on there without driving around town looking at it. But when they do get something, or they feel that there's something that they need to look at, they certainly will drive over there and look at that.
So it's probably fair to say then that it's less distractive to the operations of the pawn shop.
I would assume so, but on the other hand, we lose a little bit of that customer service also. I used to go and pick up Mary's, and this is the first time I've seen her in years when she walked in the door, but I used to go pick up pawn tickets from her pawn shop. And I haven't seen Mary in quite a few years. So I got to know Mary from going in there and picking them up. So we lose that, but we lose that as we move through the department anyway. When I moved out of the detective bureau, I lost that anyway, so.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions for committee members? I have just a couple. If someone's bringing an item into a pawn shop and the pawn shop person believes it could be stolen, and they contact either yourself or, you know, one of your staff to see if you guys could give them an ideal whether or not they should take that item or not, what is your procedure on that?
If Mary called and said, I have somebody in here, can I check this item with you? Can you check? We will certainly check that. I'm not going to tell her, please grab onto that. I would more likely say, please get their name if you can. If you're uncomfortable with that, at least write a license plate down. We can at least have something to follow up on. Well, we're not going to tell them, grab it from them and run in the back room and lock it. We don't do that.
Okay. Then also, when you do confiscate an item, there used to be a receipt that you gave the pawn shop owner with a case number and that. Is that still the continuing policy?
That's that pawn restitution that you had emailed
I
STEM
emailed
6.
you, correct.
And I started that. One of the issues way back when was the state's attorney wasn't getting the restitution. And so I made that form, and I made it pink. So when it went to the state's attorney, everybody sees a pink piece of paper coming in on a case, they know exactly what it's for. And I left, and now I'm back, and I see that restitution form is still in use. It's still pink when it goes over so we give them that form so they have the case number, which is the most important part, so that they can call at any point and follow up on that.
Okay.
Just like D6. Literally, it took me 15 minutes to look up D6 and see that the property is still in evidence.
And last, we've had a few years now working with this, with Leads Online, working with the pawn shops. Just looking back at this whole system, is there anything that either yourself or the city attorney believes that we could do better?
I don't know. To add on to that, we just received a call from Wisconsin that received a piece of property, I believe it was a computer. And when I look at this snapshot, what they're dealing with, they were literally appalled how weak our pawn ordinance is. Because they're saying, how can you even prosecute? We can't even prosecute the case that you're getting because you didn't take a picture of the person when they walked in the pawn shop and a picture of that person with that item at the time they, when you look at other ordinances around, I think we're very fair at that. I loved his comments when he said, we're not trying to change anything. We're happy the way it's everything has bumps in the road. We try to minimize that. Times change, no matter, we try to do the best we can. Is there something that could be better? I'm sure there is. Can I think of it right now? I cannot.
Okay. Thank you very much. Any other questions come up yet, or? Okay, thank you. Now I'd like to open this up for public testimony also. So if there's anyone here who would like to speak to this item, now would be your time, please.
I'm Mary Maddox. I'm with First Cash and Exchange Pawn Shop here in Sioux Falls. We've worked with the police department, I think, very well in the 20 years that I've been doing this. We've had our ups and downs. I do have a problem with Leads Online, and my problem with that is your information is being sent out of state. Your name, your address, your birth date, your eye color, your hair color, your everything. Your driver's license number. I don't think they need that. I believe that they need to find out what's coming in so that we can get stolen items back to the rightful owner. But I don't think they need a person's name, address, birth date, everything in a company out of state that who owns, from what I understand, owns the information once they get it, and they would never sell it. But you don't know that they're unhackable, shall we say. I don't think anybody's unhackable. But also, I had an issue, Terry, I didn't get a letter from you at all. No.
I used Leads Online to send it, so if it's not
okay.
Leads Online, you may not have.
Right.
I did send it out.
Okay. Then that explains why I didn't get it. I've been to court 5 times to get property back and succeeded once because the other person didn't show up. I was told by the judge I would never win unless the person didn't show up, because that's the cost of doing business. I don't think if a company takes a check from someone who went out deliberately to write them a bad check, that nobody's going to prosecute for that. That's also a cost of doing business. You should have known better than to take a check. I don't think I'm a person who can stand here and judge who is a thief and who's not. One time when I did go to court, the victim could not ID his guns. He was told by the police that they were stolen. He didn't even know they were gone. He couldn't ID the gun, yet they did give it back to him. And I believe, Keith, you were there for that one. Yeah. I guess, like I said, my big problem with this is the Leads Online thing and vital information being given out to a company that it shouldn't. I would rather it went to the police department, as it did before. And we did do the paper tickets, and we also did a computer upload for the police department. We all had to get computerized to match the city's police, or the city's computer system. We already had our own system, but we had to change it to match theirs. So we were computerized. I personally volunteered to come down after work at night and type stuff in the computer for them. So I guess, the ordinance isn't going to change. I realize that. But I would like to see some changes with Leads Online as far as personal information given out. We need to protect everyone. And it's not just the pawn shops, it's secondhand stores. We need to protect that vital information that's getting out there. That's about what I have to say. Thank you.
Any questions? Okay, thank you. Anyone else would like to testify?
Hi, I'm Linda Stoops. I've met some of you here before. Seems like only yesterday, doesn't it? Just for a reminder for those who are just coming in on this or don't remember, one of your counselors, Mr. Staggers, in the meeting on April 22nd, I believe it was, had asked the question, what need is there for this kind of thing? And he was not with you before, so he doesn't have the same information, but just as a reminder to all of us, in the years from 2000 to 2011, this is the information I gave you before, there were 13 out of 10,000 transactions at Sunset Pawn, where I'm from, that were even put on hold. That rounds off to 0%. That matches with the National Pawnbrokers Organization. They said that less than half of 1%, again, it rounds to 0% of the transactions coming through the shops. Excuse me. If you look at it in terms of money, the percentage of the cost of what was in the items put on hold compared to that was the total transactions, $16 out of every 10,000. Again, it rounds off to 0%. You have a minuscule problem. You're treating it with a boot to our throat and to the people of the town. That's not the right way to treat the people of Sioux Falls. These are honorable people doing honest transactions. And you have it in your mind, either through stories you've heard about pawn shops or whatever. It's not from the numbers. So whatever reason there is, people have it in mind that you have to judge this with an iron fist. You don't. The good news, for instance, is that out of that $10,000 that would go out, 9,984 were not even put on hold. And on hold, I'm saying not things that were found to be stolen, things that were held on to take a second look at. Now, it's interesting to see the statistics that they gave you for 2013. Have things changed? What's different? I don't have the numbers for all of the stores in town, so I can only look at my own numbers. But if you look at the 59 hits that they're claiming happened for 2013, and by hits, I don't know what that means, a match of some kind. We've never heard if that means things that literally there was a guilty conviction, or is it just things where, oh, we typed a name in and the name came up. It's a hit. I don't know. But anyway, if you look at 59 hits, and just pretend for a minute that all 59 of those involved people from Sunset Pond, then you're looking at, again, rounds to 0%, 43 out of 10,000 transactions would be the percentage. So, put it another way, 9,957 of every 10,000 transactions would be honest and honorable. This is what the numbers are. So when they say things like, you know, oh, you have to send all their information to Leads Online, really, why? Why would you have to? What's the reasoning there? Now, of course, when you think about that last thing I told you, not all 59 hits happen with Sunset Pond things. So add on all the other shops in town. I think they said there were 50 stores. And you know that there's a lot more than happen in our one store. So the figure is even tinier. So way far smaller than 0%, smaller than it is right now. There's no reason to be treating people like thieves. You are going to their financial institutions, in the case of a pawn shop, or just the places they're doing business, taking all their identity information, taking financial information, and sending it off to a private company. Now, they can tell you that, gee, there's been no problem with identity theft. But think about that for a minute. Leads Online is not a government agency. There is no oversight to it. So what they're saying is, gee, Leads Online, did you have any problems? What do you think they're going to tell you? I mean, let's be honest. They're not turning their records over to you to look through, are they? Call them up and ask them and see what they say about that. There's not a problem with us turning our records over to be sifted through, but I bet you they're not going to let you look through theirs. Now, one of the things that the police will say anytime this comes up is, well, there's a lot more thefts than we can ever prove. Okay, let that sink in for a second. From civics class, you know what? People are innocent till they're proven guilty. It's up to the state to prove something. If they can't prove it, it didn't happen. That's the way it is in America. Now, that kind of thinking might fly in other countries, but not here. If you don't have both sides of it and a judge decides, you have to assume it's innocent. Another thing that comes up is the whole idea of, well, something's stolen is stolen. It doesn't matter if we figure it out or not. I agree, that's true in the eyes of God. If you are a religious view that believes that God is all-knowing and all-present and all-powerful, that's literally true. And at some point down the line, all kinds of truth will come out that we don't know right now. But we're dealing with the present. In the eyes of the police, the courts, people, there is no way to tell ultimate truth. We only can go by the evidence as it's presented and see what comes out. And that's it. You can't go any further than that. Now, there was a letter sent out by the police to the council. They were talking about it just before I got up. And Frankly, I feel sorry for you guys. For one thing, you're not experts on this. I don't think any of you that I know of have worked in secondhand stores or pawn shops. You don't see things every day like we do. I don't know that any of you are police officers or have been recently, maybe. So in general, you don't have day-to-day knowledge of what's happening, and you have to depend on what's being told you. So you asked questions. Apparently there was some sort of request to the police department to give you information. If you noticed, I wasn't here, but I watched on TV the informational meeting in April. And you saw how many times that when people asked questions, they didn't know. They were making statements they couldn't back up. How hard is that on you guys? Because, you know, you have to depend on what people are telling you and teaching you. So here's some things you might want to consider. Actually, I could read through these for you if you wanted. I don't know if you want me to or not. There's a couple things that you need to keep in mind. If someone's trying to prove a case that this is really worthwhile, they want to show you big numbers. That's what they want to do. This is a big deal. This is something we need. Ask questions about those numbers. For instance, I thought it was interesting on this page, if you remember, there's a tiny little chart, and it has the year, items reported stolen, and guns listed. And then up on the top of that, it says this includes larcenies and burglaries. I looked up the definition of burglary for the state of South Dakota. You probably know this, but I didn't. Burglaries have nothing to do really with theft. It's kind of a glorified trespassing. It means that you were present somewhere you weren't supposed to be with the intent to do something wrong. Now, intent, think of all the people that intend to do early Christmas shopping and don't get it done. Intent is not the same as doing it, is it? So when they're telling you figures that include something that's totally unrelated to what you're talking about, they're trying to increase the numbers and make the problem look bigger than it is. Your question to them then should be, really, okay, out of each of those numbers, how many of them were burglaries? Let's get rid of those. Another thing you might want to ask is, we're talking specifically about leads online. How many of those thefts that are left involved items that had to do with things that are reported to leads online? Like, did any of those include car theft? Did any of that include gas theft at the pump? Did any of that include, say, motorcycle theft, where only a few of them involve leads online? It's the way you have it set up, only certain stores report that. Ask those questions. The numbers will dwindle considerably. And think of the different categories. Like, gee, does theft include robbery, where somebody comes into a store and holds you up with a gun and takes cash? Cash is not reported to leads online. So you'd get rid of some more. Ask those questions. Take a look, a long, hard look at what's being told to you and see if it squares up with truth. Okay, some of you probably are wondering about why is it a concern to some of us that the police have access at all to information about items that we get. We have to do a description of an item that comes in. So we're giving out the brand. Say you were talking about a gun before. So our records that go to leads online would include that it's a gun, what kind of gun is it, what's the brand, what's the model, what's the serial number of it, all of those things. Now think to yourself, how does a person identify their gun if it were stolen? What are the things that an owner knows that we don't know? And I know that seems kind of distant probably, so humor me for a second, and I'll give you an example of something. I live on a farm, and I have horses. So we're going to do a little example for you to see what it's like to think about what does an owner know that you don't know. So if you take a look at this paper that's coming around, what I wrote down on the paper are all things that an owner of a horse is most likely going to know about their horse. So just take a glance. And if you want, fill it in. Say to yourself, okay, well, what do I know about her horse? Take a guess. See how close you get. You'll look at that and you'll probably think to yourself, I don't know any of that at all, is what I'm guessing. That you don't know anything about my horse. Now,
Linda, I'm sorry, but right now we're getting way off topic. So I want to stay on the topic that we were at.
if you humor me for just a second, I'll show you that once you have a description and you have a picture, like the police will come and take pictures of items, or they'll take the item itself, how is it ever possible to make an identification of an item? Because at this point, you can now answer every question on that list. Does that make you the owner? No. And does it hurt my chance of proving I'm the owner? Yes, because I no longer know things that everybody doesn't have access to. That's what Leads Online does, and that's why it's a dangerous thing. So you have people coming into stores using the information they're given on Leads Online and coming in and making identifications on things that really aren't identifications. I can give you some examples.
I'm going to have to ask you to wrap this up, Linda.
Okay. Well, if you're interested, and I hope that you are interested, your job is to be the oversight for the police department. I hope you take that seriously. I hope that you think about the things that they're telling you and look at them in terms of, gee, what does that really mean? What have they said? Is that what they think, what it actually is, or just some words they're giving me? And also, just look through what you're doing here and think about what effect it's having on people. We've watched people come into the shop and identify things like a speaker box based on tufts of dry grass in July on a carpeted speaker box. That's their way of saying, oh, it's not identified. We've had other people come in that give totally wrong descriptions. The police seize the items anyway. I can give you more on each of these kinds of cases if you like. But Leads Online is just a way that you've given the government more power than they should have had, and you've really hurt people's chances of ever finding out truth on these matters.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for your time.
If you have more information and if you would like to email it to myself or somebody, I can pass that on to Lieutenant Mixel and the administration.
All right. Well, thanks so much.
Okay. Any other testimony? Okay. All right, with that, do we have anything else to discuss as a committee?
Move to adjourn.
One thing I'd like to say, if I may, before we do that, this, I believe, will be my last Public Services Committee meeting as the chair, and I wanted to thank all three of you. We've done a lot of work together over the last few years, and whether we agreed or not, we always tugged through it, and I really respect each and every one of you for that. And Councilor Aguilar, since we're not going to be seeing you again here in a little while, I really personally want to thank you also for your steady leadership and opinions. So thank you very much. Councilor Karski?
Counselor Anderson, 5 years as chair of the Public Services Committee, I think that has to be a record for chair of any committee. And I know it's, Public Services is kind of the catch-all committee, so we deal with a lot of very interesting and maybe unique subjects, but thank you for your service. We do appreciate it very much.
Thank you. So with that, do I have a second for an adjournment?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
This meeting is adjourned.